Justice Katju, Subramanian Swamy is determined to take you on. And he says, I will challenge Sanjay Dutt's release if he is given amnesty. Am I to presume, Dr. Swamy, that you have got nervous because Justice Katju has thrown his weight behind Sanjay Dutt?
Of course, I've got nervous, no question about it. He's a great scholar, highly respected judge. I feel like Arjuna facing Bhishmacharya in Kurukshetra. But I think the right is on my side. And therefore, I'm confident that what I say will prevail.
Why do you think the this case will go up to the president and Pranab Mukherjee will take it up at all?
Well, anyone can file a petition, but it's not necessary that it should be filed on his behalf. I think somewhere Mr. Dutt will also have to ask for mercy or pardon. And the Supreme Court judgments, which I don't have to quote to Justice Katju, the landmark judgment is that of the called the Epuru Sudhakaran case, where two honorable judges of the Supreme Court laid down the law, namely Justice Kapadia and Justice Pasayat. And there they have made it clear that the only ground on which one can consider pardon or reprieve or whatever is public good. Now I'd like to know that in what way public good is going to be served in this matter. One can argue whether the sentence was correct or not correct. Judges can make mistakes, all that. But there is no question here that almost the unanimous opinion is that Sanjay Dutt has got the lightest possible sentence under the circumstances compared to what others have got. You now have a new case of Ms. Debunisa, which is in fact more stark than Sanjay Dutt's. So what we have to look at is within the framework of these Supreme Court judgments, whether it can be done. And second, there is also a question that we are becoming an increasingly soft state. Terrorist attack takes place, and now it's no use saying that someone was not in the know or not in the know. It is the duty of every citizen to be extremely alert. And then the police does its investigation.
Yes, but
several layers of
but there is a
judicial their mind.
But there is, besides the judicial process, there is a pardon and reduction of sentence process under Article 72 and 161.
For what?
That is what Justice Katju is arguing for tonight.
No, but that is also not unfettered power. He himself would tell you that it's not an unfettered power. It is a power subject to judicial review. There are guidelines or framework or parameters that have been laid down in various judgments, and I don't think that Sanjay Dutt's case figures in any of those within those parameters.
I want to now get in, Justice Katju, among your, I want a point-by-point rebuttal from you on the points made by Subramanian Swamy, and also to his other arguments that the law should be the same for everyone. And the moral, he says, behind the Supreme Court judgment is that no matter how big you are, no matter how popular you are, you must serve the sentence.
See, law, of course, has to be the same for everybody. But the facts in each case may be different. You have to see the facts in Sanjay Dutt's case. Firstly, the Supreme Court has held that he is not involved in those bomb blasts. Secondly, all that has been held that he was in possession of a prohibited weapon, but in paragraph 70 of the Supreme Court judgment, it has been observed by the Supreme Court that those prohibited weapons were not for terrorist activities but for self-protection. That is the finding of the Supreme Court in paragraph 70. So I pleaded for pardon for Sanjay. I'm not questioning the Supreme Court verdict because the minimum prescribed is 5 years under the Arms Act. But pardon proceedings are different from judicial proceedings. And in pardon proceedings, humanitarian element also comes into play. It's not just public interest. You can have humanitarian considerations also for granting pardon. Now please consider in the case of Sanjay Dutt. He has served 18 months in jail. It is not that he is getting away scot-free. In fact, he can't get away scot-free. He has already served the sentence, 18 months in jail. Then after he was released on bail, for at least it took him 5 or 6 years to restore his damaged career, because he was almost ostracized for these 5-6 years. Nobody would come near him. He was socially boycotted. No film producer would offer him a role, thinking that the film will remain incomplete because Sanjay Dutt may again go to jail. He could not get bank loans. He could not go abroad for foreign shooting. Each visit abroad he had to take permission from court. 20 years harassment. And also in this period he has got married and had children and all. So he has served the sentence, not 5 years imprisonment.
Then why don't we close all the cases? If I were to argue,
more.
Justice Katju, just on a limited point, that by that logic we should close all the cases against all film stars, because you know there are other cases going on. For example, Salman Khan is facing a case in a hit-and-run case. Now, I'm not preempting what the court may or may not do in that case, but it's been now almost a decade, I think, since that case went on. Tomorrow, if Salman Khan is sentenced, God forbid, for him, and tomorrow he can turn around and say, you know, I have been working very hard, I'm a film star, I have restored my career, and I can get 5 film stars to say that I'm a good person.
Listen, I have not studied Salman Khan's case, so I am not in a position to comment about his case. I am commenting about Sanjay Dutt's case. And please understand, I am least impressed by the fact that he's a film star. I have repeatedly been making appeals for pardon to non-celebrities. I've quoted it 100 times in your TV channels. Gopal Das, Khalil Chishti, Sarabjit Singh. I've been pleading even for it's nothing to do with celebrity. But what I'm saying is, consider Sanjay Dutt's case. Don't mix up with other cases, because I don't know the facts of the other case. In Sanjay Dutt's case, if he had got away scot-free without going for a day to jail, or without having to face harassment for 20 years, I would have, of course, not pleaded for. But he has suffered a lot in 20 years. It is not that he has got away scot-free. He has been to jail. He has suffered so much hardships and tribulations. So, considering all those facts, I would say that in 20 years a person changes. You know, you become a different man after 20 years. There's no allegation that in these 20 years he has done anything wrong.
That's true.
Rather, he has been doing social good.
No, neither has Zebunisa Kazi. Neither has Zebunisa Kazi. I want to get Subramanian Swamy. You have a counter question, or should I have a follow-up question for Justice Katju, or would you like to respond to him first?
Yeah. I want to say one thing, that after hearing Justice Katju, it appears that he feels that we should show some mercy to Sanjay Dutt, and that we should give him reprieve as an act of grace. With your permission, I may just read out a short paragraph of Justice Kapadia's, whose judgment today holds the field. And he says on paragraph 60 of his judgment, Epuru Sudhakar versus the government of Andhra Pradesh, which was in 2006, the following: pardons, reprieves and remissions are manifestations of the exercise of prerogative power. These are not acts of grace. They are part of a constitutional scheme. When a pardon is granted, it is the determination of the ultimate authority that public welfare will be better served by inflicting less than what the judgment has fixed. Now you see, I don't understand. Here is a person who is a cinema star. He, by his own admission, was engaged with the criminals of the highest order, who are for whom there is an Interpol alert. He receives weapons from one of them. He is in, even after the judgment against him, there's a taped conversation of him in Abu Salim. He is not just a film star who didn't know what he was doing and he got into it. He was a person who had activities beyond that of a film star. And the court has been extraordinarily lenient so far. Yes, it's a fact that he has been at the lower level given exemption from being treated as a terrorist. But that is a judgment that was not appealed, and that we know in the case from the case of Kottachi and others, that obviously there is some other reason. Yeah, now, I would just say, there is today, Justice Katju has made no case of how public welfare is going to be enhanced if Mr. Sanjay Dutt is given a reprieve.
This is the second time that the point is being made to you by Subramanian Swamy. Justice Katju, do you believe that it is important to establish how public good is served by releasing Sanjay Dutt as part of your case? Do you feel your case is weak if you don't make that point? And if you feel that point needs to be made, could you please elaborate how public good will be served by releasing Sanjay Dutt?
Let me answer you immediately. Mr. Subramanian Swamy does not know as much law as I know. I have been in the legal world for 40 years. He has been more in the political world, or I don't know what world. See, let me complete, please. See, he just picks up, picking up one Supreme Court ruling and building up an argument on that is not the correct way. You have to see a large number of Supreme Court rulings. Just picking up one Justice Kapadia's ruling and then hopping on it is what Mr. Subramanian Swamy is doing.
You please quote one.
Also, listen, Mr. Subramanian Swamy, I am not here to be cross-examined by you, and I never interrupted you. Have
this.
I'm making a request. I'm not cross-examining
him. Let him complete. Dr. Subramanian Swamy.
Decency not to interrupt.
Dr. Swamy, let him complete. Let him complete his point.
Mr. Subramanian Swamy should have the decency not to interrupt me. Did I interrupt him when he was speaking? He should have some decency not to interrupt me.
I agree, you did not, but I'm only making a request.
Not to interrupt.
Okay. Dr. Swamy.
I'm making a request that you quote the Supreme Court judgment after 2006.
So please continue.
Mr. Subramanian Swamy, have the decency not to interrupt. Did I interrupt you for a second when you were speaking?
Let him continue.
I had so many requests to make from you, but still I remain silent. Have the decency to remain silent when somebody else is speaking. There must be some discipline in these discussions. There are large number of decisions where on humanitarian considerations pardon has been granted. I'm not carrying my library here to bring those books, and it can be brought in some other discussion if you want to, but humanitarian consideration is certainly one consideration in pardon proceedings. Consider the fact, this man has not got away scot-free. He has, as I said, undergone so much hardship, so many tribulations for 20 years. He has suffered so many indignities. He has remained in jail for 18 months. His career was almost smashed. With great difficulty, he could restore his career after 5-6 years by this Munna Bhai film and all that. So it is not that he has not suffered. I can understand if he had not suffered, gone to jail, you send him to jail. But he has been to jail for 20 years. Now the approach is either you take the approach of Shylock, that I want a pound of flesh of Sanjay Dutt, or you have the approach of Portia, who pleaded in Merchant of Venice that justice should be tempered with mercy. Now it is up to you. You can become Shylock or you can become Portia. But I believe in becoming Portia in a case where a person has already suffered, had he not suffered. So you must consider all this. He has not been found to be involved in the bomb blast. Only thing is that he had some weapon, and in paragraph 70 of the Supreme Court judgment, it is mentioned that though he kept those weapons for self-protection, not for terrorist activity. Yeah. That is the finding of the Supreme Court in paragraph 70. Yeah, now, in these circumstances, after he has spent 20 years, he's got married, he's got children. Now, in 20 years, a person changes. So therefore, now in these circumstances, on humanitarian consideration, in my opinion, it's a very fit case for grant of pardon. It has nothing to do with celebrity status.
So may I just make one simple point? I mean, I'm not between a former Supreme Court judge and a legal of eminence. I am highly underqualified. But it is worth noting, Justice Katju, that again I will say I'm being selective. There's this Maruram versus Union of India case, when the Supreme Court, deciding the validity of 433A, examined the power of pardon under 72. It observed, and you know it better than me, pardon, it said, quote, using this expression in the amplest connotation, talking about pardon, ordains fair exercise as we have indicated above. Political vendetta or party favoritism cannot but be interlopers in this area. So it can be argued that politicians or self-interest groups going to seek pardon cannot be an interloper to decide the whole idea of pardon, Justice Katju. I'm sure you'll agree with me that this particular citation I'm making is not out of context in the case of Sanjay Dutt. And I think Subramanian Swamy wants to add something there. Yes.
Yeah, I want to add. See, the question is, Justice Katju only talking on generalities. Why I asked him to name a judgment, because he said that this one judgment doesn't make the law. Unfortunately, that's not the general opinion. If he has a different opinion, he should tell me which judgment overrules this judgment. Number two, he uses the word humanitarian number of times. Now, fact of the matter is that most of the cases I have seen, unless he has seen some other case which is similar to Sanjay Dutt's. These cases are where a person has served for a long time and he's sick, he may die, and these are the cases where the humanitarian consultations have entered the picture. But even here, in the case of one rapist who killed a young girl from Calcutta, I forget the name of the case, but he had appealed after doing 20 years in jail, and he was quite sick, and he said, I don't want to leave the jail, but please don't execute me. And even that was not agreed to. There is no provision under the Article 72 or 161 for going into the judgment itself, whether the judgment was fair, not fair, and so on. The only consideration, according to the Supreme Court law, is that whether public good will be served or advanced, public welfare would be served, and also the victims also have to be taken into account. Here, whether unwittingly or wittingly, but with your eyes open, you engaged in an activity which was supplemental to a killing of 235 people and 700 people injured. They are victims, and their feelings also count, and that also is included in the Supreme Court for consideration when you think of a reprieve. And here is not for life. You're not executing him. It's only remaining 3.5 years. I can't see why he can't serve that sentence.
So basically your point to Justice Katju, your turn to respond. What Subramanian Swamy is telling you is two things, sir. It's an open and shut case. Also, may I please get your response to what the Supreme Court said, sir, Justice Katju, while upholding the Tata Court judgment. It said, evidence and materials perused by the Tata Court in arriving at the decision against Dutt was correct. The circumstances and nature of the offence was so serious that Dutt could not be released on probation.
Now may I answer?
Sir.
So far as that first point Mr. Subramanian Swamy raised, Nanavati's case is there. There was no public welfare in granting pardon to Nanavati. I can give you dozens, and if I had my library with me, I could have given dozens, but I'm not going to labor on that. Let me tell you one thing, that so far as Sanjay Dutt is concerned, now Mr. Subramanian Swamy has said, what about 250 people who have been killed and all?
Yeah.
Now please consider, firstly, there's a categorical finding of the Supreme Court that Sanjay Dutt is not involved in those bomb blasts. Secondly, the only charge on which he has been convicted is having illegal weapons, for which Supreme Court in paragraph 70 has said that Sanjay Dutt had not kept these for terrorist activities but for self-protection. That is mentioned in paragraph 70. So what is this Mr. Subramanian Swamy saying that he had a hand in killing 250 people and all that? The Supreme Court is saying he does not have a hand. Supreme Court has said that although he kept an illegal weapon, but that was not for terrorist activities but for self-protection. Now on what basis is Mr. Subramanian Swamy saying all this? I fail to understand. And so far as my plea for pardon is concerned, I have given you a large number of reasons on which cumulatively I am of the opinion that it is a fittest case for pardon. So therefore pardon should be granted.
Sir, may I ask you one thing?
Arnab, let me just make one point clear. I never said that Sanjay Dutt is directly responsible for this.
Go on, sir, go on. Please continue.
Can I go on?
Yeah, please continue. Sorry.
I never said that Sanjay Dutt is directly responsible for the Bombay explosion. I said that he was a cinema star, but he was engaged in all these criminals who are directly responsible. I think that it's also a question of creating circumstances in which these people can think that there can be normal, where a person who has a high reputation in the cinema world is seen consorting with them, not only before the blast, but also much after the blast. And therefore, just because he has not been held directly responsible, I think the fact that he held weapons which a cinema star shouldn't be having. What is a cinema star doing with 2 AK-56 and so many guns and pistols and so on? These are circumstances which the judges have gone into, and they come to a decision. Now we can't review the decision in a pardon. They can go on a review or a curative petition, but they can't do it through the pardon. The pardon, the only consideration for which Mr. Katju has not explained how it applies here, is whether public good would be served by letting Mr. Sanjay Dutt give up, be saved from the 3.5 years left of his sentence.
Now, Justice Katju, want to respond? Because I have a follow-up last question to you, sir. Do you wish to respond? I think he's making a point of public good for a third time in the debate tonight between both of you gentlemen. Subramanian Swamy is asking you the question of public good. Would you like to respond to him, or can I ask you one follow-up?
Yes, I've already said that humanitarian considerations are also consideration on which pardon can be granted. It is not that you construe public good in a very narrow sense, that some public welfare scheme will be set up or something. In the case of Nanavati, there was no public good in the narrow sense. He was released because of on humanitarian grounds that he had suffered so much and all that. But what I'm saying is that in the case of Sanjay Dutt, there is a categorical finding of the Supreme Court that he is not a terrorist, not involved in the bomb blast, and that he had kept weapons for self-protection.
So you keep an AK-56 for self-protection?
So therefore, although
may I ask you, sir, Justice Katju, do you actually believe that anybody keeps AK-56
yes, I'm answering you. I'm answering you. Will you permit me to answer, Mr. Arnab Goswami? I'm answering you. That is the finding of the Supreme Court in para 70. That is the finding of the Supreme Court in paragraph 70, that he kept the weapon for self-protection. You may say it is a wrong finding of Supreme Court. You may keep saying anything. Either you accept the Supreme Court or you don't accept the Supreme Court. If you don't accept the Supreme Court, then what is all this discussion about? I'm saying go by the Supreme Court judgment. In paragraph 70, Supreme Court has said that he kept it for protection. Now, you can't challenge that verdict of the Supreme Court.
There is one question I have for you.
Statement you are making.
I have one question I've been meaning to ask you this. You know, you've been quoting the Nanavati case. Now, for the viewers who are not aware of the Nanavati case, let me say this. What is the Nanavati case? In the year 1959, Kawaz Manekshaw Nanavati was a naval commander, I think, in Mumbai, tried for the murder of Prem Ahuja, his wife's lover. The High Court dismissed the acquittal and convicted the accused to life imprisonment. Now, why was Nanavati granted pardon, Justice Katju? He was granted pardon because the person he killed, Prem Ahuja, his sister, Mami Ahuja, was persuaded to forgive Nanavati. She gave an assent for his pardon in writing, and within one day, Vijayalakshmi Pandit, I think, who was then governor of Maharashtra, gave pardon. So my question to you, Justice Katju, is whether you say is directly linked or not. The fact is, this is part of the 1993 Mumbai blast case. This is not a case in which one person can come and say, give pardon. 198 people, if I am not mistaken, or more, died in the Mumbai blast. Will the families of 198 people be asked to give their point of view in writing on whether Sanjay Dutt deserves leniency? Do they not have a stake? Can they not be permitted to have a view on whether he deserves leniency?
Whom are you asking?
Sir, that question is to you, Justice Katju. And if Subramaniam Swamy wants to comment, after you. Yes, Justice Katju.
Yes, I do.
Yes, there was no public good in granting a pardon to Nanavati from the point of view which Mr. Subramaniam Swamy is making. Just because his sister of Ahuja makes a plea does not make it a public good, or sister of Ahuja says, I pardon you, does not make a public good. That is not the public good. Here, it was on humanitarian consideration because the man had suffered so much. See, the humanitarian consideration may not be relevant in judicial proceedings where the minimum sentence is prescribed, but they do come into play in pardon proceeding because, you know, if you see Article 72 and 161, it does not say on what ground is the pardon to be granted. Sir, it is very widely worded that the president can grant pardon. It does not mention on what ground,
no, sir,
how much time it will take.
So I can equally, so if I may rebut, that, may I ask you, Nanavati was not granted pardon on basis of any humanitarian considerations. Nanavati was a politically connected man. He moved in high political circles. He managed to get the sister to write a letter saying forgive him. And the governor passed it. So Nanavati
So,
was
but where's the public good?
not pardoned
what-
on humanitarian considerations.
All right. All right. What was the public good in granting him
Well,
pardon?
there was no public good, but there was no humanitarian
it is not
consideration
that
either.
public good. Public good is, Arey Baba, I am telling you, Article 72 and Article 161 do not mention the grounds on which pardon should be granted. It is very widely framed. So there is very wide power to the president or governor to grant pardon.
Okay.
Of course, all power should not be used in a mala fide manner.
Yeah, okay.
This is the only restriction.
Okay,
No
okay.
power should be used in a mala fide manner. Okay. As long as it is bona fide, it can be on humanitarian ground, it can be for public good, it can be because the sister has appealed, it can be various.
Whatever.
It should not be mala. That's all.
Okay,
There's no,
Dr. Subramaniam Swamy has a comment on your and my interpretation of Nanavati, of the Nanavati case.
Yeah. Well, first of all, you see, Nanavati's case 59, and it's due to a series of misuse of this pardon that the 2006 judgment was a decisive judgment to lay down the law. In fact, in Tamil Nadu, for very often every year on the birthday of Annadurai, they would release hardened criminals as a birthday gift for Annadurai. And same thing happened in Andhra Pradesh when YSR Reddy released about 1,600 people on somebody else's birthday whose name I'm going to take here. Now, therefore, somebody went in appeal and then it came all the way to Supreme Court and the law laid down is the latest. Why I keep saying is that Justice Katju must mention which judgment he is relying on, where he talks about this humanitarian applying to everybody. I know that humanitarian cases can be for people who are going to die or very aged, have served most of their sentence, etc. But here, for the kind of case for which Sanjay Dutt is been convicted, I don't see any judgment which fits it. And he remembers Nanavati, but he doesn't remember any other judgment. And yet he says that he knows more law than anybody else. Now that is something which I have never questioned that. I have always considered him a great scholar in the field of law. But the fact is that here we have to go by objective standards. And even if 72 and 161 of the Constitution does not put any limits on the power of the President, Supreme Court judgments have interpreted on judicial review that these are the parameters within which the decision must be taken, and none of them apply to Mr. Sanjay Dutt.
Now, I want to say one thing. Justice Katju said twice tonight that if you were raising that point, he says he can point out enough judgments to contradict you. And I'm sure he will. No, I'm sure he will. What I'm going to do is, I'm going to perhaps take this discussion forward, because I think we've had a proper legal debate for some time, after some time on the News Hour tonight on this subject. I stand corrected, Justice Katju, not 198 but 257 people died in the 1993 Mumbai blast. I said something wrong there. But gentlemen, you've presented 2 points of view. I can say this, no two better equipped and aware and erudite people could have debated the legal contours of the Sanjay Dutt controversy than Subramanian Swamy and Justice Markandey Katju tonight. So tonight only, I'm closing this with a promise to come back to this debate. Justice Katju, would you like to say something to Subramanian Swamy? Because I can clearly see here, he makes the point to you 3 times tonight. He almost seems to be challenging you to another News Hour debate. Would you like to say something to him?
Mr. Subramaniam Swamy has practically conceded that humanitarian consideration is also consideration, but he says it should not apply in Sanjay Dutt's case. Perhaps he was referring to Zaybun Nisa's case. So therefore, in a sense, he is conceding that that is also one of the considerations, because as I said, Article 72 and Article 161 do not mention on what grounds it should be.
Okay.
It should not be mala fide. It should not be wholly arbitrary.
Yes.
Something ridiculous. Otherwise, there is very wide power, humanitarian consideration, public good, public welfare, various considerations. It is not limited to public good, as if Mr. Subramaniam Swamy is trying to say.
Well, I can only say this, the judge has the last word. Justice Markandey Katju and Subramaniam Swamy, thank you very much for joining me on debate number 1 on the News Hour tonight.